3 serious reasons on why I think the SCHD ETF is about to go parabolic. The Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF is my personal favorite, buy and hold for every ETF of all time. And for me personally, I've been buying shares of SCHD for several years now. But as of recently, maybe more than ever, I think that this ETF is not only starting to move back towards the right direction, but also has the ability to go parabolic sometime in 2024 and beyond. And in this video, I'm going to give you 3 specific reasons on why I think so. Now, if you own SCHD, have ever been on the fence of owning it maybe, or anything else of the sorts, stick around because I promise you are not going to want to miss this. Before we get into today's video, make sure to please go to the first link in my description and grab my brand new dividend investing ebook and dividend tracker bundle. I promise you guys are going to find tons of value in both. So for those that might not know, what is this so-called SCHD ETF that we're even talking about? We're talking about the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, better known as the Dividend Growth King and one of the most popular dividend growth ETFs across the entire market. Now, the ETF's objective is pretty simple. It's to track as closely as possible before fees and expenses the total return of the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index. Now, SCHD is tax efficient, has a very cheap expense ratio, pays a very nice starting dividend, and also has consistently went up in price over the long term. But over the last year, this ETF has struggled, barely turning green during a time when the rest of the market, in some cases, is up over 50%. But with this, I think personally there's a massive buying opportunity for SCHD, and I've been buying all the way since the most recent lows at around $66 per share. Now, the first reason I think that this ETF is going to go parabolic in 2024 and beyond is because of one of my favorite metrics of all time when it comes to this ETF and when it comes to investing, the dividend growth rate. You see, just as of recently, back in the beginning of December, the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF announced a 74-cent per share payable dividend, which was massive even compared to the previous year's 70 cents per share. Now, like I touched on earlier, I think this is a very important aspect for the sentiment around this ETF because over the last year, there were a lot of long-term investors that were previously very interested in buying into SCHD that were a little bit unsure of the future dividend growth prospect. Because after all, dividend growth is one of the most important metrics that SCHD has to offer. If you look at the last 10 or so years that SCHD has been trading, you can see that every single year the dividend growth rate has been up around 15%, 9%, 7%, even years upwards of 20% dividend growth. Which for those that might be a little bit confused on what I mean here and why this is so important, for investors that bought a share of SCHD, let's say, back in 2020, on a quarterly basis, for example, in 2020, an investor back in December 2020 got paid a 60-cent dividend, which was still pretty massive. But now for those same exact investors that did nothing but hold onto their shares, they are now getting paid 74+ cents on a quarterly basis. Now, this marked an important milestone for this ETF, and it showed that this ETF is going to continue, most likely to grow the dividend over time. For example, if you look back in 2018, which relatively speaking was not all that long ago, back in December of 2018, this ETF paid a 41-cent per share dividend, which was also pretty big compared to the previous year. But if we were to fast forward just a few years, around 5 years later, we are looking at a 74-cent dividend being paid. Now, I'm pretty tied in with the SCHD community and a lot of investors that were sort of on the fence about whether or not they wanted to either continue to buy into this ETF and or add a lot more shares to their portfolio. It really was dependent a lot on if the dividend growth was or was not continue to move up and to the right. And because of this most recent increase, I'm very bullish in this ETF. And I'm also very hopeful and pretty sure that the dividend is going to continue to move up and to the right for years to come. A lot of SCHD investors, including myself, were hopeful but a little bit nervous to see what the future December dividend would look like. Now, I've definitely talked about this in previous videos, but I tend to honestly think that the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF's dividend growth rate plays a very important role in the overall investment vehicle and, of course, the investor sentiment. Because after all, if you look at SCHD's dividends quarterly, since this ETF's paid the very first dividend back in 2011, the dividend growth has been something very special when it comes to this ETF and has made a lot of investors very wealthy over the past decade or so. Now, for me personally, I've been buying shares of SCHD on a daily basis, as you can see right here in one of my larger dividend growth portfolios, and I've been buying around 1 to 3 shares across all my portfolios on a daily basis. Now, I know there's some investors out there that buy many more than this on a daily basis, and there's some investors out there that might not have enough cash balance to do so. But I showed this just to make things very clear. I personally, as a long-term dividend growth investor, believe in SCHD and the future dividend growth ahead. The next reason on why I think SCHD is going to go parabolic sometime soon here, most likely in 2024 and beyond, is because just as of recently, the Fed held rates steady and indicates that there's cuts coming in 2024. Now, if you've happened to see my videos before, you know that I spend a lot of time on the Fed rate monitoring tool website to sort of see where the Fed's going to be putting rates in the future. If ripped out, there's going to be cuts, raises, etc. And ever since the Fed spoke as of recent, it looks like there's a good chance that we could see some good sized rate cuts coming as early as 2024 now. So much to the point to where there's a really good chance that rates by this time next year will be around 3.75% up to 4%. Now, basically, since the Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates, you've seen what it's done to the markets and what it's done to things like SCHD. But if we find ourselves at this time next year with rates substantially lower than they are right now, I think equities are going to rally like crazy, and SCHD is going to be riding right in the back of that. The next reason on why I think SCHD has a chance to go parabolic next year is because there's a reconstitution coming up very soon. Now, for those of you that might not know, according to Investopedia.com, a reconstitution involves the reevaluation of a market index. The process involves sorting, adding, and removing stocks to ensure that the index reflects up-to-date market capitalization and style. Now, to be more specific, these are the top holdings in SCHD as it sits right now. Now, remember, SCHD does track another index, but as of right now, names like Broadcom, Amgen, Verizon, AbbVie, and others are the top holdings. But what's important to note, and what I think could happen as soon as early next year when the reconstitution does happen, when certain names, certain stocks within this index get removed or added, it's going to shake things up quite a bit. And it's done this in the past. For example, I remember last year the reconstitution took out some names that were offering massive dividend yields. So although some investors were a little bit worried that SCHD's dividend would suffer, at the same time some of the new names that were added had a lot more growth potential. And again, it's all just potential. You don't know what's going to happen if names get added and or taken out. You don't know if it's necessarily going to make SCHD move up or down. I'm just saying. But with the reconstitution coming up very soon here, we are definitely going to see this ETF get shaken up quite a bit, and hopefully, just hopefully, for the better. Now, when it comes to a reconstitution, I am personally very excited to see which names get added and taken out when it comes to SCHD. Because for me personally, I'm a huge fan of SCHD's dividend growth. The methodology is awesome. But some of the top holdings within this ETF as of right now are not necessarily my favorite stocks of all time, if you catch my drift. So during the up and coming reconstitution, if SCHD can pick up some new super high quality names and ditch some dead weight. So there we have it. Those are 3 different reasons on why I think the SCHD ETF, the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, could go parabolic as early as within the next year. Now, the markets move very quickly, but a lot of investors fail to remember that this ETF was over $80 per share just a few years back, and as of recently has been moving right back up towards that direction. But now I want to hear from you guys down below. Out of all the 3 things we went through in this video, let me recap them. I went through the fact that SCHD did raise their dividend to a brand new all-time high dividend back in December. I also brought up the fact that the Federal Reserve is done raising interest rates and most likely going to be doing some massive rate cuts in 2024. And lastly, the fact that SCHD is going to be going through a reconstitution early next year. Out of all those different things we went through in today's video, I want you guys to comment down below which of those 3 you think has the biggest potential impact on the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, and which of those, if any of them, are going to send SCHD to new all-time highs in 2024. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.